Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're taking a look today at another low-cost tablet from China. This is the Chuwi HiBook 10.1, and a lot of people were interested in this one actually because it has a rather unique feature in that it can dual boot either Android or Windows 10, so you can run both Windows and Android on a singular device here, which might be very useful if you are using both operating systems quite a bit, and we'll be exploring that more a little bit later in the video here. Now, I should mention in the interest of full disclosure that this came into the channel free of charge from Chuwi. It came all the way from China or Hong Kong, but all the opinions you're about to hear are my own. Nobody is paying for this review. No one is reviewing this video before it is posted either, and I'll be donating this to a local nonprofit when I'm done reviewing it and answering any questions that you might have. So let's get into how all of this works. This is actually a two-part device here, so you have to buy the tablet portion separately from the keyboard, and it is a bit of an effort sometimes to detach the two components here. So not the most elegant latching mechanism. It does have a magnet that will eventually kind of guide everything in and get it docked. And once it's docked, it's pretty solid and sturdy, but it does take a lot of effort to pull it out and get everything taken apart. So the tablet portion is $210, at least the current price that I'm seeing on Amazon for it. You've got a 10.1-inch 1920 by 1200 display. It's IPS. It actually looks pretty nice. The one thing I'm noticing with this, and I've seen this on a lot of other low-cost devices, is that you can kind of see the wires for the touch-sensitive display here. You can kind of see it reflected in the light when you're out in sunlight or other places where there's light reflecting down on it. There's also a good amount of an air gap between the touch layer and the actual display. So there are higher quality devices out there, but they cost more. But the screen overall looks pretty good because it is IPS and you've got some pretty decent viewing angles on it. It does run a little bit on the cold side as far as its color temperature is concerned, so a little bit more blue than I'd like to see, but really not bad for the price. Again, $210, 4 gigs of RAM, 64 gigabytes of storage, an Atom X5 Z8300 processor. So a pretty decent layout here for the money, and it's a good, nice thing to have 4 gigs of RAM. Now, because it has 64 gigabytes of storage, you do get a little bit more space available on the Windows partition. So there's about 30 gigabytes free when you install everything, or at least get it booted up on the Windows side, and they allocate about 9 gigabytes for the Android side. You get about 8 gigs or so of available space. It will be running Android 5.1 Lollipop when you get everything up and running there. So the keyboard dock here is a separate component. This is an extra $56, but all in, not a bad price actually for getting a Cherry Trail processor with 4 gigabytes of RAM. So you get a little bit more multitasking done on this thing. They also have a 1-year warranty, which I thought was pretty nice to see on one of these devices. I haven't tried sending it in for warranty repair, but they seem to be one of the brands that tends to do a little bit better with customers than others. Everyone's mileage might vary, and that's one of the things you want to be careful about when you buy these Chinese tablets, because you are getting a good deal, but you may not always get the best support because they are an overseas company. So let's take a look at the ports on both the tablet and the keyboard portion here. So you have a headphone microphone jack over here. You have HDMI out. It's a micro HDMI output there. You have USB 2.0, a micro USB connector, so you'll need to get one of those OTG cables to connect things up to that. You have a USB Type-C connector over here, and this is also what it uses to charge. They give you a very small wire with it though, so you really can't get to, I actually had a hard time using this on my desk because the wire was just so short to the AC adapter, so you may want to get a longer USB Type-C cable to charge it. That USB Type-C port is also a USB 3.0 port. However, you can't use it, of course, while it's plugged in, so you might want to get a USB Type-C hub or something like that. You have a micro SD card slot here for augmenting its onboard storage, so you can store media and other things on it there. You have your volume rocker and power switch on this side here. Nothing on the bottom. Underneath you have the dock connector for connecting it up with the keyboard, and that's pretty much it for ports, but a good amount of ports actually for a tablet in this class. You've got a camera on the back here. I believe this is a 5 megapixel camera on the back and a smaller camera on the front here for doing web conferences and selfies and that kind of thing. Now, what's interesting about this is that it looks pretty nice on camera, but it does feel a little bit more generic in person when you're actually holding it, partly because they did use lower cost materials to get the price point, I'm sure, to where they're at. So the screen picks up fingerprints a lot more, as you can see. It doesn't have that premium feel to it, even though it kind of looks like a premium product. It's hard to describe, but it feels like a lot of the other plastic low-cost tablets I have used, but at least it does have a metal casing that will hold up a little bit better over time. Now, the keyboard dock was a bit of a disappointment, especially given the price. It too is made out of aluminum, at least on the top portion of it. The bottom portion feels like a rubberized plastic. It does add a good amount of weight to it. The keys are rather small, in fact, a little bit smaller than I typically typically like on a laptop keyboard. But what does work for me here is that there is a good amount of travel and the keys are well spaced. So I didn't have as much trouble typing on it as I thought I would. So that was good. The touchpad here, though, is really not so great at all. It's not very big. You don't have a lot of room to move around. It's overly sensitive to tap to click, so you probably want to turn that off because it's very easy to have it issue incorrect commands. And it really doesn't click down that far. There's great travel on the keyboard, but not very good travel on the touchpad here. So it's a little bit difficult, especially to drag files and move files around in the Explorer than I'd like it to be. So I wasn't too crazy about that. You saw how hard it was to pull the whole thing apart earlier. So it does really kind of latch on so much so that you almost feel nervous trying to force it apart. So it does. You won't have a problem with the screen coming off by accident, but you'll also have a hard time getting it off on purpose. Big disappointment, though, is with the USB ports on the keyboard dock. There are two of them on both sides here, but they're only USB 2.0 ports, so you're going to lose a little bit of speed there. So the only usable USB 3 port on this device is the USB Type-C connector that you're using for charging it. So I would have liked to have seen some USB-C ports in the keyboard dock, especially since it's got $50 or $60 price premium depending on where you get it from. So that is the overall hardware. Let's take a look now at its Windows performance. We'll step through a few of our usual things. When we're done with that, we're going to boot it up into Android, and they actually make the process of going back and forth to Android or to Windows pretty easy. So let's have a look at Windows first. And one of the challenges I've had in shooting this review is getting a good angle on the screen for you to see, because it is such a reflective display, and I've been really struggling to keep it clean also. Every time I touch it, my fingerprints stay on there, so I've been using a chamois here. You might want to keep these packed in your bag for keeping the screen clean on it. That blinking light there is because it is charging, so that is a charging indicator. That can be rather annoying. You have a light blinking at you constantly, but that is one of the features of this device. You'll also notice there are a couple little spots on here. These are blemishes that I can't seem to get off the screen. So this is how it came to me. I don't know if the review samples they send out are kind of seconds and the ones that they sell to people might be better, but it wasn't a good experience to see some of those screen blemishes in there. And of course, we have a little bit of backlight bleed on the side. Now, my biggest knock here, though, is the fact that they already set up a user for you who's an administrator with no password. And this is very bad practice to have this as the official greeting to your computer. So you basically click the sign in button and you've got an administrator account here that doesn't have a password. So I would suggest the first thing you do is set up a username and password for this device so that you can better, more securely use your computer. This is not a good way to run Windows on any computer, and it's kind of disappointing to see a manufacturer start off with no username and password and basically have somebody at the factory kind of configure your computer for you before you get into it. Another issue that I found with this is that although it is running with a full version of Windows 10, it's the Chinese version of Windows 10 that's running with the English language. So if you were to reinstall from Microsoft, you have to go and download the Chinese version, and then you have to poke around and get the US English language reinstalled on it in order to get it back up and running. So you can't activate it off of an American or any other country's Windows installation. Only the Chinese one is going to work with it. This is a common issue with a number of other Chinese manufacturers, but at least it is legit, and that is important there. So let's get into some performance here. We'll load up my 4K video file from my YouTube channel, and as I always mention, you want to use Microsoft Edge for playing back higher end video formats on these Windows 10 low-end devices, primarily because Chrome at the moment isn't really optimized for the greater load that these videos require. So the Edge browser does work with it. So I'll switch it up into 2160p, which is the 4K version of the video I have here. This takes a second for it to spin up. This does not have wireless AC. It is only wireless N. So it does take a little bit, maybe a little bit of extra time sometimes to get things up and running. But once the video is playing here, we are running a 4K video downscaled over to the screen size you see here, and it seems to be running just fine. I'm not getting any drop frames. I've been testing this over the last couple of days. Once the video gets moving here, we don't see any more drop frames, and this is consistent performance with what we have seen on other Cherry Trail devices, so it does perform well there. So as a web browsing device and as a just an overall video playback device, I think it will do quite well. And on the Octane benchmark test, which measures how well it can do all the things that the web requires, we get a score of 6,729, which puts it pretty much in line with what I've seen other devices running this Cherry Trail chip get. We saw a desktop computer from Transmart do a little bit better, but by and large it performs where I would expect a mobile device to perform with this Cherry Trail processor. So decent performance and decent web browsing experience, both for browsing the web and watching videos and other things. Now let's take a look now at Microsoft Microsoft Word. We've got our newsletter template up here that we usually look at, and we'll just kind of scroll through it on here. This is about what I'd expect a Cherry Trail chip to give us as far as performance is concerned. It's not going to be as fast as a more expensive computer will, but it's certainly usable. This is kind of like the biggest Microsoft Word document you'll ever throw at it, and you can see here we're moving images around and things are flowing quite nicely. So Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, other things should be just fine on here. Now the one area that this doesn't perform as well on is with gaming. So let's take a look at a little bit of Minecraft, and then we'll talk about some of its benchmark scores. All right, so here we are with Minecraft, and it's not doing as well with Minecraft as I've seen other Cherry Trail devices do, but I think there might be something to do with the screen resolution here, because this is a 1920 by 1200 display. A lot of the Cherry Trail devices that are mobile devices we've looked at run at a lower resolution, around 720p or so. So I think if we turn down the resolution a little bit, we might do a little bit better, but not the best Minecraft performance I have seen. I am running with the Optifine performance enhancing plugin, and when I ran my benchmark, the 3D Mark CloudGate test, I got a score of 1,393, which actually put it below what we've seen some of those other Cherry Trail devices do. So the MegoPad T4 and the Intel Compute Stick, all those did a little bit better in that test, primarily on its graphics performance. The processor speed for the physics test looked about right across the board, but I think that for whatever reason, the GPU connected to, or part of that Atom Cherry Trail system on a chip on this device is not running as fast as it is on some of those other devices. So that's going to impact your gaming experience a little bit. This isn't really a gaming device per se, but the kinds of things that would use the 3D accelerator are not going to do as well on here as they might on some other Cherry Trail devices that we have looked at in the recent past. But it does do well with high bitrate movie files. I'm going to boot up VLC and see how it does with a Blu-ray MKV file. All right, so here we are running VLC with one of my favorite Blu-rays at the moment, the new Star Wars movie, and it's running off my solid-state disc here, plugged into the USB 2.0 port on the device, and it is playing back just fine. This is something we've seen on all Cherry Trail devices. They really do well with high bitrate movie files, 1080p files, especially like this one, and some of the 4K stuff we were playing on YouTube before. So as a multimedia playback device, I think you'll do quite well. Now, battery life on this is about 6 hours or so. There's no battery in the keyboard dock like some of these devices have, so your only battery is what the tablet has built in. So when you're doing something like playing back a movie or something like that, you're going to be closer to 5 hours or the low end of 6. When you're doing less strenuous activities like web browsing and other things, you'll do a little bit better on the battery, but I can't see this really going past 6.5, 7 hours, even in the best conditions. So that is the Windows performance. Now what I want to show you is how we can go switch it over to Android, and it's actually pretty easy to do. So what we can do over here, there's a little icon here that says Switch Now, and what we're going to do now is do just that. I'm going to click on that icon. What it's going to do is ask for additional privileges to get everything running here, and I'll just confirm that I want to switch to Android, and then it's going to restart. And when it does reboot, we will be booting up into an Android operating system. Now, one of the things that I noticed with this when I first booted up into Android is that it was all in Chinese. I had to actually go in and take all of the, or at least go and find the language thing and move it over to English so I could actually use it. So another little oversight here. It was completely in Chinese when it first booted up into Android, and then I went in and changed that. So we'll let this boot up here. You'll see how fast the Android partition comes to life. Again, you've got about 9 gigabytes or so, with about 8.5 gigs, give or take, available for loading apps on. And again, I think it's going to be difficult to resize these partitions because this seems to be pretty locked in for what everything is configured as. So if you are not afraid of messing around with partitions on the fly, you might be able to make some adjustment on here, but it's not something I feel comfortable recommending people do. So I think you're going to be kind of stuck with what they give you here. So we'll just wait for this to boot up. There we go. We're in Android mode. It will automatically rotate the screen here, and we can go in. And actually, I found that the device is certainly more usable in tablet mode with Android perhaps than Windows is sometimes. But if you have Google Play applications, you can get at them here. We can load up Asphalt 8 here and see how that plays back. And it does pretty well graphically. This is running with a pretty powerful Intel chip for an Android device, so you will get some really good Android performance out of this. So we'll load up Asphalt 8 here. Now, there are stereo speakers on here. They don't sound all that great, but you do get good stereo separation. They are rather tinny, but good enough, I think, for the price. I try not to ding these devices too much on those kinds of things, again, given the price point. Something that costs more, I would probably be a little bit more critical of it. So we'll let the little level here load up so you can see what some of the graphical capabilities are. And again, you're dealing with an Intel processor that's capable of running Windows, which is now running Android, and it does do pretty well here. So you can see this level here as we load up, and we'll just get into the game game real fast, and you can see how it performs as we're going here. So we'll let the thing go to town here. And I forgot how to play this game. I think this might be one of those motion control games, so you can get a feel, though, for how well it runs. A really nice performance overall. It does have I think it'll do very well with some of the casual Android games out there. I did run the 3D Mark Ice Storm test on this, and I got a score of 17,577, which puts it just below some of the flagship smartphones like the Moto X Pure Edition, which did a little bit better, but it is far below the $150 Shield K1 tablet that came in at 29,561 from NVIDIA. So if you are looking specifically for a gaming tablet, that one might be a better value, but this one can run Windows in addition to running all of the Android stuff. So as an Android device, it's going to do really well because it is on the higher tier of performance. So I think you'll have a pretty good experience running all your Google Play apps on here and everything else. You do just have to futz around with it a little bit and move it over into the language of your choosing if you do not read Chinese. But once you get around that issue, I think you'll have a good experience getting everything running here. And as you can see, it is a pretty nice little performer here for Android. So that is the Chuwi HiBook 10. I'm pretty impressed with this little device, primarily because it runs both Windows and Android so well. I do wish there was a way to adjust partitions on it. It doesn't appear that there is an easy way to do that, but it does a nice job of running both OSs with a decent processor and a good amount of memory and storage available to both operating systems. The only issues I'm seeing here are with its graphics performance, especially when it comes to playing some light games. So it's not going to do gaming, especially 3D games like Counter-Strike and Minecraft, as well as other similarly equipped devices that we've tested here on the channel. But it is a nice little device for running both operating systems if you are heavily invested in both, and it's very easy to switch between the two of them. One last thing, I took a look on Chuwi's website. They do have full system images available for download along with the drivers, so you can actually restore both operating systems if one of them gets mangled from drivers that are available on their website. That's something I see every day with some of these Chinese manufacturers, so it's good to see that there is some options available should your machine get messed up to do a restore and hopefully get it back to where it was when it was new. This is Lon.TV, and thanks for watching. This channel is brought to you by my Patreon supporters. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to Lon.TV/Patreon to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit Lon.TV/S.